Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Profit Builder. I'm Vicki Suter, your host, and I am really delighted to have my guest, Dortha Hise, with me today. And today's topic, we're going to talk about virtual assistants and hiring virtual assistants and how and why you might want to do that. And I'm going to let Dortha introduce herself and give you a little bit of background about her in just a second. And then I have a series of questions that I'm going to ask her that I think are going to help you determine when is the right time to hire a virtual assistant. So I'm going to let Dortha introduce herself, and then we're going to talk a little bit about why might you want to hire a virtual assistant. And especially in these days, I think that we're having so much of a difficult time finding people and or there's the concern of the economy, and is it shifting, and should I hire somebody? And so we're going to kind of talk about all those things, and we're going to talk about how to figure out how to hire somebody and what you might use them for. But before I jump into all of that, Dortha, thank you so much for being here as a guest today. And
Thanks for
would you just
having
tell
me.
people a little bit about you, and then we'll jump into the questions.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. Like you said, I'm Dortha Hise, and I have run my multi-team virtual assistant business since 2004. And we really specialize in partnering with our clients in a wide variety of topics that could be anything from, social media to blogs, website updates, helping them keep their email marketing current and fresh, making sure things are, spam compliant, all of those kinds of things. These are all things that we love to nerd out on, and they're totally in our wheelhouse. We, can design graphics. We can do a whole variety of things that we really enjoy as a team. And I really partner with my clients and keep their bottom line in mind, which is, I think, why Vicki and I have worked together for as long as we have, because I appreciate the skills and education that you bring to the world, and I have learned a lot from working with you as well.
Yeah,
So,
thanks. Yeah, I didn't even mention that Dortha and I have actually worked together for, I didn't actually look up the exact date, but I think it's been like almost 15 years.
I think
So
you're right.
it's been a very long time. And really it was sort of in the early days of virtual assistants. And
Yeah, before it was
and so it
cool.
might be good to actually start by defining like what is a virtual assistant versus like a subcontractor, right? So like when like I think about it, that a subcontractor tends to be somebody who's more focused on a narrow area of expertise. Like I have an office manager who is a subcontractor to me, and she manages all of my accounting and payroll and taxes and all that kind of stuff. Like she manages that whole part, but that's her area of expertise, and that's pretty much the lane she stays in. Whereas my work with you, as you just described, kind of covers all those other areas, right? It covers
Yeah.
doing marketing, email marketing, social media stuff, blog posts, putting it up there, keeping, our database up to date. So it really helps a lot in terms of, for me, a lot of the back end stuff that, is really necessary and important, but I don't really need somebody full time on my staff. And that you have that multifunctional expertise in terms of like, well, whether it's website or social media, or how does Facebook work, or LinkedIn and all those other things. So
Hmm.
I have really found it to be hugely valuable. Obviously, I appreciate you tons because we've been working together for all these years. But
Yes.
I think that maybe a good place to start, the first thing is, what is the advantage of hiring, maybe you could speak to this, a virtual assistant versus an employee? What do you see as some of the advantages of that? Like, why do people do that?
Well, I think one of the really attractive things about working with a virtual assistant is we don't have to be long term. When you hire an employee, it can feel a little bit scary, like, oh my gosh, I have to get all this paperwork and like all these things. And I'm not saying you don't have things with a virtual assistant, because you do. It can just be a lot less daunting. So you can try, it can be a trial period. I always recommend to my clients, let's try it out, right? Let's go on a few dates before we,
Yeah.
decide to go steady. And so it's kind of one of those things where I really think you can put your toe in the water and try out the versatility of the skill set of somebody. And every virtual assistant's different. Some are very, very focused on a specific area, like just social media. There are some people that do, like graphics and things like that. So everyone can have a kind of different approach. And I think I can say that I appreciate my first client very much, because she helped me really hone in on being kind of not one-stop shop but for lack of a better word, kind of a one-stop shop, because I really wanted to diversify and be able to be that key person for my clients. And I think depending on what you're looking for in a virtual assistant, there can be a whole wide variety of those things and all in between.
Mhm.
I also think one of the other really beneficial things is that they work at their own schedule. So you don't have to worry about them working like 9 to 5, or are they punching in or punching out. They do things on their own time. And as long as you have a very open dialogue about expectations and when things are going to be turned around, it can be very beneficial. For example, I have teammates on the East Coast who do things, while their kids are sleeping. And that means I get it at, 5 or 6 in the morning when I get up. And that's great because, they did it the night before. And yeah, then the wheels keep turning. So it's kind of one of those, yeah, that it's very beneficial in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I'm going to just add a couple of things just as I was listening to you. One of the things I really appreciate is that by hiring a virtual assistant, I get, Dortha's not the only virtual assistant I have a couple of others as well, but they have expertise in a particular area that I can really just count on and trust. And it's not a matter of, like an employee who I have to train or has some experience in a lot of various areas, but maybe not really a lot of expertise in that area. And it's also more economical because sometimes you're going to pay for, like you were talking about, you might have to pay for physical space for somebody, but then like, what do you do when things slow down? The ability to be able to fluctuate the amount of work depending on what you have going on is really helpful. And one of the other distinctions I would make with a virtual assistant is, like you and I have been working together all these years, is that with a virtual assistant, it can be a project basis or it can be a longer period of time. Like one of the other virtual assistants that I work with kind of does project stuff for me. And it's occasional and they do a project, but in their particular area of expertise. So I find that I get really a high skill level using virtual assistants. And, in our relationship, I have felt like I can really count on and trust on you doing that thing, but I don't have to hire somebody and I'm not really managing them. Like you have a team of people who work for you who do different things and
Mm-hmm.
you're managing them. I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really helpful.
Yeah.
So the next question I have that we came up with was, when can a business owner determine it's the time to consider hiring a virtual assistant? So when do you find that people generally is like the time for them to consider that? What would you advise people?
I think there's kind of a wide swath for people. And lately, what I've been hearing from people when I have potential client calls is I've been sitting here trying to figure this fill in the blank thing out for hours. And yes, I could figure it out, and I'm tired of it. I need to have this time back so that I can focus on my business. I think that's one category. And then I think there are also people who, right out of the gate, know, you know what, I'm building something and I can't do this alone. So I'm going to get a team together and we're all going to do it together. I also think that somebody who either has like an inbox that goes unanswered for days and days and days, or they're missing appointments, or they're missing things like with their family, like missing, Johnny's soccer practice, or, that dance recital you're supposed to be at. Those are the kinds of things where it's probably an indicator that you've got like way too much going on, and that's great. And it's probably time to bring in some support.
That's great. I really appreciate what you just said because, yeah, that's that whole thing of, I know for me, I just had this conversation recently with somebody and I was feeling, somebody was coaching me and I was really feeling overwhelmed.
Mm.
And, I was kind of telling her what I was doing. She goes, tell me like what the last 2 weeks have looked like. And I started to describe it to her and she goes, you need to get somebody who handles this piece for you. Like you need to stop handling that piece. So even for me, it's like, as long as I've used virtual assistants, I'm like, oh, it's time for me to look at what do I have to let go of so that I can focus on big picture stuff. I can focus on, revenue generation, team management, like, the strategy of my business, and rather than the mechanics of some of these things that, while they're not difficult for me to do, and oftentimes it's like for us as business owners, like we're we're the jack of all trades, like we can do it all, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we should. And yeah, so I think that your point is really good. If you're missing your kids' soccer games or dance recitals, or you're working nights and weekends, it's like, all right, what's when is it time to look at what can I let go of, what can I have somebody else do?
Or if you
And
have this going on too much, right? When you're supposed to be having
yeah,
FaceTime with somebody, like
yeah,
that's probably also an
you gotta pay
indicator.
attention to that. Yeah,
Just one
yeah.
more email.
And I will say that, like, your expertise happens to be in the domain of marketing, social media, like graphics, that kind of stuff. But there are virtual assistants who actually who have expertise in other areas, right? So don't think of it, I know Dortha and I are having this conversation about her and what she does in her business, and those are the services I use from her. But there are other virtual assistants who do other things that you might want to look at for yourself and ask the question, hey, are there things that I can offload to somebody else that are, that somebody who has that expertise, and I'm not spending that time. Well, so if somebody is looking to hire a virtual assistant, what are some of the questions that they would want to ask when they're interviewing someone to know, are they a right fit?
Yeah, gosh, that's a great question. I kind of have over the years, kind of come to, okay, like these are some of the minimum things. I like to know, like, do they have a retainer or can I pay them by the hour? Do they have a preference? Do the hours that I pay for, if I do like a retainer, do those hours carry over? Will I be working with you directly or am I going to be working with someone in your team? You'd be really surprised at how often you'll meet with someone and then find out you're getting handed off to somebody in their team. And it's like, hey, wait a minute, I built this relationship with you and now you're passing me off. So that's one of the things I actually like to touch on when I meet with clients because I'm actually the face of my company and I want to meet with the clients and then I work with my team. So you want to probably establish that with whomever you're meeting with as well. Another question that's really good to know is if there's a minimum number of hours required each month or, each retainer cycle or however you guys agree to set it up. Are they going to create an agreement or contract for services or are they expecting that you will? Some of those kinds of things are just like putting protections in place for both you and the VA. And then what form of payment do they accept is always good to know. Time zone is a big one,
What was it
especially,
last one
like
again?
the payments or the time zone.
Oh, time zone. Okay.
Yeah, time zone. Knowing where they're located so that way you're able to anticipate, okay, if I send this over and we say you're going to have it back to me in 2 days and it's 5 o'clock my time zone, does that mean that it's 5 o'clock their time zone? Like, so making sure to have that conversation and know those expectations. Knowing the preferred method of communication for people is also really important. Do you have turnaround times for requests when I send them? Is there the ability to put a rush on things? I have clients that are notorious for they'll send in something and they'll be like, oh, this is an on fire emergency and I needed it yesterday. And I'm like, oh, for the love of, but those are the kinds of
I have to
things
admit
that
that's me sometimes.
and even talking about you, I was totally thinking about someone else.
But I try not to, but yeah.
You are really good about that. You do your best not to do that. And then if they do offer a rush service, it's always good to know, is there a fee for that? Because then when you're going into it, you're not surprised at an invoice for X number of dollars because you asked for that to be rushed. So those are kind of the high level questions that I like to get out of the way when I'm hiring somebody.
That's awesome.
Oh.
So those are awesome questions. And will you be willing to share that list of questions with people who are watching and listening here?
Absolutely. I have a little checklist.
Awesome.
It's a couple of pages and there's some budget questions in there as well and some other helpful things to gather when you're thinking of hiring someone. Sure.
That's great. That's super helpful.
Yeah.
So I will make sure that I include that with this post so that people can download that and use it as a guide. Because I think that, when we get into those conversations, it's sort of like interviewing even employees, right? When we get into those conversations, the more prepared we are for what do we want to know and what's important, and have it in writing. I just find for myself makes it so much easier to feel like I'm asking the right questions to get, to come to a good decision. So that's awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So how do you keep current on new things, changes, etc.? So when you're hiring somebody, And yeah, can you just speak to that? Like when you're working with a virtual assistant, how do you do that? How do you keep current on new things and changes?
Well, I tell you, my inbox would probably terrify most people because of the number of things that I subscribe to so that I can touch base with things and keep current. From social media things changing to email platforms bringing in new this or that's. Um, all the things are always changing, it seems like. Every time we log in somewhere, it's a different interface. So really, I think the biggest thing is, getting somewhere that you feel that you're getting good and comfort, confident in the information that's being shared. I follow a number of experts and gurus in a variety of areas, and that's where I personally get my information. So I take it from that source, and I also fact check. I'm a big making sure, like, okay, yeah, just because so and so said it doesn't mean that it's true. I'm gonna go just like dig down a rabbit hole, just like 10 minutes, nothing like crazy. I don't spend half a day on it or anything, and really just try and make sure that I'm validating that information. Then I also do talk with my team and make sure either they've heard this or, like if I have that person in my team that's specialized in that, hey, did you know this thing is coming down the pipeline or whatever? And then we do actually turn around and put that out to our clients and say, hey, these changes are coming. FYI, don't freak out next time you log in to blank. Those are how we personally handle them. And I know a variety of different ways for different virtual assistants that are out there. There's, newsletters, YouTube channels, all the different things. You can hashtag things and go search things on Instagram and Twitter and all those places
Yeah.
as well.
I will tell you, I always appreciate when I get those emails from you because excuse me, I don't, I'm not doing all that kind of digging. And so that helps me feel like I'm staying up to date. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, what type of services do you, so you talked a little bit about services you provided, and I just want to, like, if people are interested, I really appreciate all the information that you provided. That list of questions is going to be amazing for people to be able to use as they consider hiring a virtual
Yeah.
assistant. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you, how could they do that? And yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm on all the social places, well, most all the social places, and that's probably one of the easiest ways to connect with me. I do have a website. It has some information on it, but I think, either email or probably social media is one of the best ways to reach out. And also, if you do visit my social media, you can see some of the work that we do because some of the graphics that you'll see there are things that either my team or I have created.
Okay. Do you want to tell people what your email address is and your
Yeah.
social media handle?
Yeah. So you can find me by my name, Dortha Hise, and it's DorthaHise. And my email is virtual, like a virtual assistant, virtual.dortha, DORTHA @gmail.com.
Awesome. And your website?
Pretty smart virtualservices.com.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Thanks so much. I really appreciate you sharing your time and your expertise.
Yeah.
Love that you're going to share that, share that list of questions for people to ask when they're looking for a virtual assistant. And for all of you listening, watching, I will tell you it's been a lifesaver for me as I have grown my business, and I'm not alone in that. Hiring virtual assistants can be such a great next step when you're trying to find somebody in a market where it's tough to find employees, but also where, in this time when we're faced with potentially a downturn in the economy or shift in the economy, that sometimes we don't want to take that risk of hiring somebody as an employee, and or you don't want to have to be training someone. So a virtual assistant is a great way to really get somebody with focused, targeted expertise who can help you on an as needed basis. As Dortha said, it's not a continual commitment, and it can really help round out your team in a way that you don't have to add like all these people to to your as employees and then trying to figure out and make sure that they stay busy. So and I will tell you that in my experience, working with and managing virtual assistants is far less time consuming than managing employees, because they're business owners, right? They think like a business owner. So they tend to be much more much better at self-managing. So I can definitely say that's a really big plus. Well, Dortha, thank you again for being a guest here on the Profit Builder today. And make sure to check out the list of questions that are down below that Dortha has so graciously provided for you. And I look forward to seeing you next time on The Profit Builder.